Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills and grit take centre stage. I'm Donal O'Donoghue and this is episode 33. The podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, talent solutions that transform businesses globally. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Irish middle distance runner Amy O'Donoghue.
Thank you very much for having me on.
It's always good to have an O'Donoghue on.
Fellow O'Donoghue.
Exactly. Well, listen, thanks a million for coming in. And before we get into the career and balancing your two careers, we love to get the context and understand a little bit about where you grew up.
So I'm from Limerick. I grew up in a place called Coona, which is kind of like on the outskirts of the city, but it's also only like a 5-minute drive away from the city. So yeah, grew up there with my mom and dad. I'm an only child, and when I was about 5 or 6, I started Irish dancing. I was thrown into everything, but I started Irish dancing and then I started to take it quite seriously. So then when I was 8, I decided to join a dancing school down in Cork, which meant my mom used to take me to Cork 2 and 3 times a week. I used to leave school early and go to Cork 2 and 3 times a week for Irish dancing. So a lot of my childhood was like car trips down to Cork, back up. So yeah, that was my childhood. And then
So a very dedicated mum and an early kind of tendency towards high performance if you took the dancing that seriously.
it's funny because it's not until you get older you realize that really set me up for running, because anyone who knows about Irish dancing, or like if you don't know about it, it's gone very elite and it's very high pressure, like it's very cutthroat, and at a very young age you're traveling to America, England, you have to try and qualify for the major championships. And you're like, I just remember like when you're a child, you're side stage and you're about to go up on stage and you might get a mental blank, and it's like dealing with that pressure. So I think from a young age, I was actually living like an elite athlete. I just didn't know it at the time. So I do think that by the time I started running, I was used to that. And it was kind of the only way I knew how to live, really.
And what were you like in school in relation to study and academics and that kind of thing?
It's funny because I think a lot of high performance athletes are like type A and like everything is perfection. But I worked hard in school, but I wasn't as committed as I was to sport or dancing. So my passions, I was very committed to. But school, I worked hard and I did what I needed to do. I could definitely have worked a bit harder, but I put most of my energy into dancing and then running.
And what did you think when you were going through, say, secondary school and you visualized your future? What did you visualize your career being?
I always wanted to be a teacher, but I think that's because, you know, when you're young, you're like teacher, doctor, all the usual jobs. But I definitely saw running as the main thing in my life. And when I went to secondary school, going to America on a scholarship was always in the back of my mind. So once I had that decision made, that is how I envisioned my life. Now, I did think I'd go to America and stay in America and meet the quarterback on the rugby team or the football team, not the rugby team. And I had all these like funny visions in my head. And then I ended up leaving America after a year when I went there after secondary school. So a bit different to what I had initially thought.
Well, take us back to when you first got involved with running. How did that come about, or what was the background to it?
Well, it was actually a bit of an accident. So it was first year in secondary school and we went to the North Munster Athletics. So it was probably like May, it was track. And because I was known as the Irish dancer, my PE teacher, his name is Mr. Sutton, he was like, you know, you're fit from the Irish dancing, so I'm going to throw you into the 800 meters. And I was there for the day off school, so I didn't care what I was doing. I was like, yeah, fine. So got to the start line and I was in like a basketball t-shirt, basketball shorts and my runners.
You'd never run 800 meters before, had you?
No, I didn't even know. I was like, how many laps is this? Like, is this 2 laps? He was like, yeah, it's 2 laps. So got to the start line and you had girls like me who had no idea what they were doing. But then you had the girls that ran for clubs that were in their spikes, their running gear, their singlets. And I was like, oh my God, like, what have I gotten myself into? And then we started and I just ran. I didn't know what pace or anything. And
did you pace yourself off the girls that had the spikes?
No,
or did
didn't
you
have a clue.
Just did your thing?
Just did my thing, didn't have a clue. And I ended up winning. And I was like, oh, that was kind of fun. And then my cousin, Anne O'Mara, she was coaching in Emerald at the time. But it is in my blood because her brother, Frank O'Mara, is a 2-time world champion and an Olympian. So it definitely is in my blood. But I decided to join the club, Emerald, the local running club, and started training. So the track season runs kind of from May to August. So my first race was in May. And then I ran in the Munsters maybe a month later and was second to the current All-Ireland champion. And then a month later ran in my first All-Irelands and I beat her and I won my first All-Irelands. So it was very nice because my very first experience of it was winning. You know, I feel like I didn't have to work my way to the top, which a lot of runners who are now competing at the Olympics might have had to do that. You know, they mightn't have started out winning, but I did start out winning. And I think that's why I enjoyed it that much, because I was like, oh, I'm good at this. I enjoy this. And then because I had the mentality from Irish dancing that I was used to training and used to high pressure, it worked really well because I was able to do that without having to be forced to, or someone down my back being like, you need to go training, you need to do this. I was used to living like that. So I think that's why it worked out really well.
And it's interesting that there was the base of talent there, because when we thought about this podcast, there was 3 kind of themes that run through it. So there was talent, which is, you know, your predisposition towards being good at stuff, then the skills you acquire, and then the determination to get through the tough times. So to build from a base where there was a natural tendency towards being good at it is a great place to start. And as you said, a lot of people don't necessarily have that initially.
It's funny though, because I was thinking like, what are the chances that my PE teacher put me into the 800? I don't think I would have won the 100 because I don't have that like natural speed. So it's just funny thinking back that, you know, the way everything works out, that he obviously saw potential maybe and put me into the 800, which is the event that I think from Irish dancing, you have the fitness because you have to be quite fit to dance. And then because dancing is plyometrics, you also have like that power, which is perfect for middle distance running. So yeah, it's just funny really how things work out.
Like these accidents and coincidences that kind of set you up. You're a teacher, and one of the things that I think that's really interesting, and this team has come up with some of the female athletes that have been on the podcast recently, is the whole idea about, I suppose, visibility and participation, particularly for secondary school teenage girls in sport and keeping them in sport. What worked for you and what kept you engaged during the teenage years where there's lots of distractions?
Well, one thing that we didn't have, which I think is a curse now, is social media. So I think a lot of teenagers are just stuck to their phones and they're on them so much, but they're also comparing themselves to maybe unrealistic images. But what I found really helpful was having a community. So when I think back to being a teenager, like the things that stick out for me is going to the competitions with my friends and all the friends that I made from it. And obviously you had your race, but the most exciting part of the day as a teenager is getting to meet all your friends from all around the country. Because, you know, you'd get so used to seeing everyone, and then you'd meet a few times a year at maybe the Munsters, the All-Irelands, and then if you were lucky enough to make an Irish team, you'd then get to go to internationals. But like, you know, I just remember like, you know, we'd stay up all night at them like after our race, and those are the fun parts. So I think it's so important to have a community and have friends, and, you know, you're going through, it's really hard, especially at that age, to train when all your friends are starting to drink and go out. So I think you really need a strong community. You need friends. You need to like what you're doing, and you need to like going to training. I think that really makes a difference. So making sure it's fun and making sure you have fun people to train with, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's really important as well is the parental support or guardian support or whomever is there to keep people on track. I mean, you've got to be self motivated, but that support structure of having people that will encourage you and get you there in the rain
Yeah.
and all that's really important as well, isn't it?
And I think I'm very lucky in the sense of being an only child. My parents always had the time to take me to training and take me to the competitions and give me the best opportunities possible. But I do think it's very important because there are certain times when you're young and you're not feeling like you want to train. So having someone say, no, come on, like, let's go to training is really important because if you don't have that extra motivation at a young age, you might just fall off the wagon and say, "Yeah, look, I don't really care anymore." Whereas having that extra support makes the world a difference.
Huge difference. Talk to us about the pathway because I think this is one that's really interesting for people moving from, as you said, kind of training a couple of times a week during the teenage years to actually seeing there's a pathway to represent your club or potentially represent your country. What was the pathway like for you?
So in secondary school, I would have competed for Ireland at, let's say, like under 15, but it did come quite easily to me through my school's career. So I would say I was, I started winning from a young age. So then I expected that of myself. However, I never made the Olympics. You have people that made the Olympics that, were at a lower level completely and worked their way through the rankings. So I think it definitely looks different for everyone. And I got a scholarship. I was very lucky to get a scholarship to the University of Arkansas, which is like a powerhouse college in America. But it's also very possible that you mightn't even get to your full potential until after college. So for me, it went like secondary school, I ended up making Irish teams, and then you get interest from colleges in America. So then I got a scholarship and went to America. Now, unfortunately, that didn't work out.
Talk us through that. Go back to the days because it sounded like that was really what was on your mind.
It was.
Talk to us about that experience.
So up to the year 2010, my athletics career was just plain sailing. I was winning. There was no injuries. I had to work very hard for what I did, but I would have said it came quite easily to me. From 2011 onwards, the injuries started. So in 2011, I was trying to qualify for the European Youth Championships. Do or die, I was making this championship, but in the process ended up injuring my foot, which that injury reoccurred 3 or 4 times over the next few years. So in 2012, I did my leaving cert. I was in and out of a boot that whole year. You know, the boots you wear when you have bone injuries.
Know them well.
So then I ended up going to Arkansas, but I was coming off an injury. I wasn't at my fittest. And it's a very different experience. So when you are in Ireland, you're competing at the highest level, I would say you're a big fish in a small pond. You go to America, you're 18. For me, I definitely wasn't mature. I was also quite a home bird. And you're just thrown into the deep end where you have all this freedom. You're also coming off an injury. There's a huge increase in training. And where you had friends all over the country, you are now competing against them on your team. So on your team, there could be 10 other girls in your event. Whereas in Ireland, you might be training with 1 or 2 and they might be in different age groups, but you're still friendly. So it is very like training like a professional athlete, except you're only 18. So my experience was I would never change it, but it was definitely not a positive experience. I had some positive memories from it, but I went over and I struggled with the training, first of all.
Was that because of your injury or was it just a culture shock in terms of the intensity or the level? Or?
Everything. I think it was going over not at my fittest, but then the culture shock, being away from home. You're still trying to figure out yourself and trying to figure out who you are. And I remember so well, I came home for the Christmas break and I knew going back, like I was upset, like, and I was crying and I was like, I held a brave face. So I remember like being like to my parents, bye, in the airport. And then I like turned the corner and like just started crying. And I was like, oh, I just don't think this is right. but I was in really good shape. I had gotten back into good shape, and I went training one day, and because of my injury history, it was flagged. Like if I ever got pain, to say it to them straight away. So I just felt something in my foot, wouldn't have even said it was pain. And I just said, listen, I think there's something wrong. And they're very efficient over there. So I got the scan and everything done straight away. The next day, went out for a run, came back to our like training room, and there was a boot up on the bed, and it was like, yeah, you're in this, you're injured again. You have stress reactions. You in your navicular, you have a stress reaction in your metatarsal. I can't remember which one it was, and back in the boot. So you're now talking winter in Arkansas, snowing, not the funnest place to be. It's very remote, and I had to go around on, you know, those scooters. You know when you see people and they have their knee
mobility
up on
scooter.
yeah. So I had a
lovely.
mobility scooter, a boot.
Living the dream.
Living the dream. I struggled with my weight over there, which is hugely common for girls actually when they go away to college in America. I would say it's because where I lived was, or where all the athletes lived, but it's unlimited food. And it's like everything and anything. So I was like, oh my God, I can have pizza for breakfast. So that took a bit of getting used to. And then, you know, the coaches would make smart remarks about your weight. And I just don't think as an 18-year-old, I was ready for that real cutthroat environment. And it was also like a college where there was Olympians. They were one of the best in America, which when you're thriving and you're running well is great. But unfortunately, when you're injured, you're just not a priority over there. So luckily, my mom had asked me to defer my place in Mary I for teaching. And I was like, I won't need that. Like, there's no way I'll need that. But thank God I did, because I did out the year. I did my freshman year, and then I came home and went back to first year in Mary I.
Brilliant. So talk to us a little bit about how you balanced training, kind of rehabilitating from the injury, and then your time in Mary I.
So I think by the time, so I still hadn't solved that injury by the time I left America. So I got home from America. I went to Galway Clinic and got an x-ray. This surgeon, Dr. Prasad, he said, have you ever actually gotten an x-ray on this foot? It was just MRIs I was getting. And I said no, and then got the x-ray, and he was like, you have a bone spur, and that's what's been causing these bone injuries, like these recurring bone injuries. So ended up getting surgery, got that fixed, and yeah, that sorted it. But I don't actually think it ever would have been sorted. So by this point, I had lost my confidence. I had raced 2 or 3 times in the last few years, and they were just nowhere near what I had been doing before I had moved over. So started college and just slowly built back up. I would definitely say I enjoyed college. I went out, I had fun. I have a great group of friends, and we're all still very close. But I definitely didn't reach my full potential or anything. I feel like for me, college was, I had fun, I was fit, I was doing well in running, but I knew there was a lot more there. And I think now, if I was ever to give someone advice on going to college in America, I think you're way better off to do your college in Ireland and wait until you're 22 and then head off to do your master's. And it's actually quite common now. It's gone really popular where people in Ireland will wait, and England as well. They'll wait and then they'll go over and do a master's. I think you're way more mature. You have the college fun out of your system. And at that age, you can decide like, okay, yeah, I want to try this seriously and I want to give my all, or I don't really want to do it. So I would definitely say to anyone, wait until you're 22 and you've got that college out of you. So by the time I was finished college then, I was like, you know, I didn't want to go straight into full-time teaching straight away. So I was living at home and I was subbing, but I was basically training full-time. And that's really when I started to see the improvements again.
And talk to us about that. What was the rebuild like?
Well, I think so. So first of all, when I finished college, I decided to move coach. So I was so close to Anne, and still am so close to Anne. But we had a decision where I was the oldest in the group, and I was training with people who were a lot younger than me. And I really felt like to push on, I would have to change coach. And if I was ever going to change coach, Joe Ryan was always the one I wanted to go to. So I reached out to Joe, and yeah, we've been going strong since then. But Joe he's such an amazing coach because I feel like he cares about us so much as people, and he's so realistic, and he knows if you're having a hard week or you have something personal going on, like he's like, okay, pull it back, let's change things around. So Joe's based in Mullingar. So after college, I would have gone to, and still do, Mullingar training on Saturdays, and then was training pretty much on my own in Limerick. But I feel like it's okay when you're training on your own for the easier days, but it's always really nice to have a group to train with for sessions because you'll push yourself harder. So 2018, I was starting to really come on again. I came second to Ciara McGeehan at Nationals, and I beat girls who had way quicker times than me. So that, for my confidence, was really, really good. Then 2019, I won my first senior title, my first national indoor title, and I ran for Ireland at senior level, which is always a big deal, like your first senior cap. So 3 times I ran for Ireland that year, and I was also getting really great opportunities from social media. I was working with Lifestyle, and I did a campaign with Lifestyle and Nike. I went to Switzerland with Lifestyle to do a campaign over to San Moritz, which was amazing. But all those things were helping to build my confidence as a runner. So I would have said that year, 2019, was definitely one of my best years. And then 2020 was COVID, obviously. And I think like maybe just from the fact that everyone was at home and we weren't having to work, I really came on that year and I felt quite driven and quite motivated. And I also started, like, I grew on social media that year. I think because I just was like talking like honestly and authentically about the ups and downs of running. And then that year,
But did you very consciously make an effort to create more content or to?
yes.
So it wasn't by accident.
No, it wasn't. I think I had slowly started to invest in the mental side of running. And then I was like, I wish I knew this when I was younger. I wish I understood the importance of like training your mindset. It doesn't just happen. You have to work really, really hard at this. And I just felt like it wasn't spoken about at all. Even things like tracking your period for girls, making sure you have your period, all these really important things. And then in 2020, I won my first outdoor nationals. And it's so funny because the night before, so on Saturday you have your heat and on Sunday you have your final. And I was drug tested on the Saturday. So I ended up having to stay pretty late in the evening. And I was staying in a hotel up the road from where it was on. And it was like quite a high hotel. I'd say there was like 15 floors. And before races, I always had this belief that like everything had to be perfect. If you wanted to run your best, it had to be perfect. So everything was fine and went to bed. Next thing, the fire alarm starts at like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Oh dear.
And I was like, okay, this is annoying. Then it didn't stop. It didn't stop. Everyone had to leave, go downstairs. So I'd say for like an hour, we were just standing outside. And I'm in my head thinking, oh my God, I have a national final tomorrow that I was really, really hoping to win. So I'd say after another maybe 30 minutes, back up my 30 flights of stairs. And I was like, oh my God, like what is going to happen tomorrow? So I tried to stay in bed because the race wasn't until Sunday evening. And when I tell you, it was one of the smoothest, nicest races I ever ran. And it was my first outdoor title. And I will remember it so much because, you know, when people talk about that flow state, that was definitely what I would call a flow state. I wasn't in pain and everything just unraveled how it should have.
Wow.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a real mental strength in that, isn't it? Because it would be very easy to let negative self-talk come in thinking, I'm not properly rested, things have been disrupted.
Yeah. And like I was going in and I was really trying to hype myself up and be like, you can win this. But of course, in the back of my mind, I was like, and I can be a bit dramatic sometimes. So I remember ringing my coach and I was like, oh my God, I've like last night's sleep. Like, what if I'm tired? What if this? What if that? But I did have the work done. So I was quietly confident that I could win. And it was funny. I remember during the race, also it was behind closed doors because of COVID. So there was no one in the stadium. And it was in Santry. Do you know the track in Santry? There's a little gate like behind the track. So while we were running around, not only could you just hear our footsteps, but you could see like the coaches and the parents and stuff were like trying to like peep in the gate. Luckily, it was on telly, so I feel like people could watch it on telly anyway. But I remember crossing the line and being like so thrilled, but there was no one there. So I was just like celebrating kind of on my own and with the other girls in the race. But it's really funny because for me, when I think back to that race, I visualized everything right down to my interview on RTE after the race. And so I think that was one of the races where I really, really focused on visualization, and it worked. You know, I used to kind of not laugh at it, but I used to be like, that doesn't work. And literally right down to my post-race interview, I had gone through it in my head so many times so that when it was actually happening, I was like, I've been here, I've done this.
It's amazing, isn't it? And talk to me a little bit about the balancing, balancing work and balancing training in relation to your training regime. And the reason I ask is I saw the other day Sophie Becker announced that she's going full time, and it just really hit me, like the level of training that athletes are doing, for example, that end up in the Olympics, and then you realize they're training at that level and holding down a day job. So from your perspective, how do you balance it, and what's the training regime and the work regime?
Like, it's just crazy when you think of Irish Olympians still working. In any other country, I don't really think that would be a thing, or not as much so as it is in Ireland, whereas a lot of Irish Olympians actually do work, and it's insane. I'm very lucky that I job share, so I'm not working the full week. I do 3 days, 2 days, 3 days, 2 days. And even at that, when I moved up to Dublin in 2021 and got a job, the difference between having the full day to train and having to squeeze in your training or get up early before work, I think it makes a massive difference. And all I have to say is fair play to people who are competing at an elite level and also working full time, because it's really hard. I think you're tired. When you're tired after work, the last thing you want to do is then start your training day. So I think it was definitely a big adjustment for me, because I had gotten used to training full time, and then I started working and I was like, oh my God. And I'm also a dilly-dallyer. I will give me the whole day and I will find something to do. Like, some athletes would hate that, and they'd be like, no, I would not like to be full time. I'd be overthinking, whereas that's just my idea of paradise. Like, I love training and then just like pottering. So I think the big thing for me is, if I am having a stressful week at work, I will pull back on the training. I think you really have to, there's no point in pushing through when you're stressed. I think it's really important to, if your body just isn't up to it, you just have to pull back. So I think that's been a big thing, is just really listening to my body, because if you're stressed and if you're working, your likelihood of getting injured goes up massively. But if you really listen to your body, get sleep. I wasn't a big sleeper before that, so I think I've really had to work on my sleep, because you really see the difference. Like, when you're working and training and you're not getting enough recovery in, it's just going to show in your results, and you're going to lose motivation a lot as well. So I think just making sure, like, you have to be nice to yourself as well, not being too hard on yourself, and really just listening to your body, I think.
And for any of the primary school age kids that are listening, what do you like as a teacher? How would your pupils describe you?
I think they'd say I'm pretty nice. I'm pretty chill. Because I'm a learning support teacher, I don't have a full class. So my job is more one-on-one. Or if a teacher is out or sick, I'll jump into that class. And I don't think a lot of them, because I've actually had a lot of injuries since I moved up, I don't think a lot of them know that I run competitively. A few of the older kids would, and they'd be like, oh, I found your TikTok or something. So I feel like I would be pretty chill. But it's also a different environment, because it is one-to-one. So you don't have that classroom management as much. So yeah, I'd like to think they think I'm sound and relaxed.
Very good. For a little advice for people that are joining clubs or starting to get involved around the country, when you look back now, what advice would you give somebody that's at that stage?
Starting a club, or that they want to join,
or just maybe early stages of just starting out?
I think community. It really comes back to it's so much easier to put the hard work in when you know you have people to do it with. And I remember a question I used to get from people was like, "Oh, I'm really finding training hard," or "Do you have any advice on what to do when you're just not motivated?" And when I get chatting to these people, they were training on their own, and I was like, "You need to find a group. Like it will help you so much." And I find even when I haven't trained with people in a while, and then I'm with my group training, I'm like, "Oh my God, this just really makes the world of difference." So big thing I think is find a group and find a group that you enjoy. You know, like play around. Like you need to also enjoy the crack with the people that you're training with. So find a group and do enough training that you can maintain consistently. What you find, I think, is people will start running and they will go at this crazy pace. They will try and do it every day, and the next thing they're burned out and have lost all motivation. So I think you're much better off to, if you work especially, pick 2 or 3 days a week that you know you can stick to. Bring your friend with you to hold yourself accountable, and make sure you keep enjoying it. Like, of course, there's going to be days that it won't be enjoyable, but for the most part, you should be enjoying it more than disliking it. So yeah, I think really having company and community would be the main thing.
Brilliant. And what are you looking forward to in the near future?
An injury-free year really is my main thing. I think when I look back at my running career so far, it is unfortunate that a lot of years have been kind of tainted with injury. And it's hard because you know that you haven't gotten the best out of yourself. And that's just how I feel now. Even working and stuff, I just know I haven't reached my full potential. My coach would say that to me, my parents, my friends. And it's hard when you year on year have setbacks to keep going. But like again, that's just the risk you take with high performance sport, I suppose. So I think if I can just get a year with no injuries and consistency and really enjoy competing again, that's my main goal. I think just to get back to my PBs and enjoy it and stay injury free.
Brilliant. Well, we wish you the absolute very best with that. Where can people find you if they want to follow your work?
On Instagram, my name is AmyOD94, and that's where I post the most. So yeah, Instagram.
Brilliant. We'll add that to the show notes. And can I just say thanks a million for
Thank
coming in
you.
for the chat. As I said, always good to see another O'Donoghue. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube and follow our Instagram. They're both at talentmatters_podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor, Sanderson, and we'll see you next time.